Looking for fresh opportunities and new discoveries? The EU developed a new youth strategy and invites you to engage and become an active citizen, involved in democracy and society. Tell us what is important to you by taking part in the youth dialogue. The EU provides you with opportunities to connect with other young people across Europe and beyond. Benefit from youth exchanges offered by Erasmus+. Learn by travelling through Europe with Discover EU. And take part in volunteering and solidarity projects with the European Solidarity Corps. The EU wants to empower you so that you develop useful life skills. Discover youth work, its development possibilities. The EU Youth Strategy is there for you. Engage, connect, empower. EU Strategy. Fresh opportunities, new discoveries.
So welcome everyone. I see there's still people arriving to our webinar. Let me just put on my presentation. So welcome everyone to our webinar, Making Europe More Youth-Friendly. My name is Jochen Schell. I'm the director of YEP Europe, and I will tell you more about YEP Europe in a minute. We have also here my colleagues Tanja Katzbert and Carla Morales. Maybe you can wave to our audience, and of course our key speaker Alicia Holzschuh, and I will introduce you also in a moment. I wanted to start this webinar with giving you a little bit of a very short introduction about us, YEP Europe, and a little bit of contextual information about this webinar and some information about technical aspects. So YEP Europe is, here we go. YEP Europe is an organization, an NGO based in Berlin. We are part of the International Academy Berlin, and we are basically at the heart, at the center of a network, of a European network of communities and youth organizations. And you can see here some key figures. We are celebrating 20 years of YEP this year, so it's our birth year, which we celebrate. And with regards to the network, we have 40 members. We are present in 18 countries, and we have about 110 communities in this network, working with our YEP approach of youth and community empowerment. And we have about 12,000 residents directly involved in our activities, YEP activities, of which 5,000 young people. With regards to our activities, as I said, we are at the heart, at the center of this network, and apart from coordinating the network and being in charge of expansion and all these kind of technical work, of course, in terms of content, one of our main missions is the development of capacity building programs. So you have basically a lot of programs we develop are in different fields which are very close to young people's needs. We do on a regular basis needs analysis on what kind of issues are important to young people in our network, what kind of needs do they have in terms of capacity building, and in terms of the programs we have been developing programs in, of course, youth and community empowerment issues, but also media work, things like fake news, cyberbullying, hate speech. We are very active in entrepreneurship, in social entrepreneurship in particular. We call it community-based entrepreneurship. So we've been developing programs in this field, social inclusion of marginalized groups. It's also maybe an important thing about YEP. Our core group or target group are young people with few opportunities. This is very important. And then other topics are also human rights, in particular children's rights. Hopefully soon also a program on climate change or the climate emergency, and what we also do right now is to check what are new needs, or what are the new current issues for young people due to the COVID-19 crisis. So just very shortly to tell you who we are, and with regards to this webinar, I also wanted to give a little bit of context. This is the first webinar of 4. It's a webinar in the context of an Erasmus Plus program, Key Action 3, support for policy reform, civil society cooperation in the field of youth. And we are 12 partners from 12 countries, which you see here on this slide. And our main mission in this project is to basically disseminate, to promote the EU Youth Strategy and the European Youth Goals through local activities, international activities, face-to-face, online. This webinar is one part of it, and there's also video series, there's a social media campaign, and many more things. So, as you've seen in the video, today we'll talk about the EU Youth Strategy. The next one, the second one, will be more focused on the youth goals. But let me now also, before introducing Alicia, a couple of technical aspects. Maybe you can participate in this webinar through using the chat, the Q&A session at the end, where you can write questions. The polls, maybe Tanya, you can launch the first poll so people can see what it is. It's regular polls here, and the first one, we want to check how you found out about this webinar, so you can use it. It's a pop-up window where you can tick answers. And if you are used to conference calls, of course, you are used to camera and microphone. In this case, in this setting, this is not possible, but you can use the chat and write your comments and questions. And last but not least, we're also live on Facebook. We are very happy to see that we had about 230 registrations. Unfortunately, we have only seats for 100, but people can watch this live on Facebook. And that's about it, about the technical things. You will find these chat and Q&A options in your menu at the top or at the bottom. You can play around with them. So this is it from me. Let me introduce you to our key speaker, Alicia Holzschuh. So you will tell maybe more about yourself, but very shortly, Alicia is the program officer of the National Agency Erasmus Plus, Youth in Action, and European Solidarity Corps for Key Action 2 and Key Action 3. And you are also the contact person for the project's youth work against violence, radicalization and extremism, and European Academy on Youth Work. So thank you very, very much for being with us today. And you can tell more about you and the organization, and the floor is yours. Thank you.
Perfect. Well, thank you for having me here today. I'm really happy to be the guest speaker, the first guest speaker of this webinar series, and to have the honor to actually introduce you to the EU Youth Strategy. So I will try to start to share my screen now. Let's see if that works. Yeah, well. Okay. So I hope everyone can see the presentation now. So yeah, I don't think I have a lot to add actually to my person, to myself. As I was introduced, I'm working for Key Action 2 and Key Action 3 at Jugend für Europa. So it's the German national agency for the 2 EU youth programs. And yeah, I'm also responsible for some other content work we are doing within the NA, as was already said before. So maybe just to quickly give a short overview, who is Jugend für Europa, because we're mostly known for being the national agency of the 2 EU youth programs. But beyond that, we're also involved in a couple of other things in more content-wise work, which could be, for example, working on youth policy, but also on the whole topic of recognition of youth work in Europe, but also on national level. And of course, one of our main tasks also to actually support the implementation of the EU Youth Strategy 2019-2027. And that's why I'm actually here today, I would say. So it's kind of referring to this content work we're doing at this point for this webinar today. Yeah, so as you might already hear, I'm kind of a quick speaker. So I would ask you if I'm going too quick, if you can't follow me, please somehow just give us a sign. I will try to slow down, then not to lose you on the way. I'm still working on it to speak slower. Sometimes I'm managing, sometimes less. So don't be afraid to just give a sign if you have actually trouble to follow me. Yes, and so before I go into speaking a lot and telling you a lot more about the EU strategy, I would actually like to start with a couple of questions to kind of see where you're coming from and which knowledge you're actually bringing into this webinar, because I can't see you, but you can all see me. So I thought it might be nice at least to read you a bit or to hear your voice via the poll we can have in the beginning. So there should be 3 questions that I prepared beforehand, just to check a bit actually what you actually know already on the EU strategy, your background, where you're coming from, and when it comes to program implementation, also to see, yeah, what you know already and what I should tell you and what maybe not. Yeah, so the first question would be more about what you already know on the EU strategy, if you've heard of it before or not.
Alicia, do you actually see the results in the poll or not?
For now, I see the questions, but I know I saw the results for the last one,
Right.
so I guess I should see
the technical detail. I will have to publish the results. I do it in a second. Everyone.
Okay.
So here we go.
Okay, so it seems like most people have heard of it. Some are quite new and are really interested in getting the basics, I guess. And we even have some people almost knowing it by heart already. So that's nice to hear. Okay, thank you for that. So I think we can go to the second question. So yes, working for the programs.
Coming in.
I'm of course curious to see what you actually already know about the different activity types we have there.
So I think, yeah, no more coming in. Share results. Here we go.
Okay, so kind of what I expected. A lot of people are familiar with Key Action 1, some experience in more strategic approaches, some knowing a lot about all the different project parts. And let's see about the last question when it comes to the European Youth Goals.
People are still answering.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if I'm looking weirdly on the left side, it's because I have the second screen there where I can see the results. So that's why I'm turning my head from time to time.
Okay, here we go.
Okay, so actually a lot of people being curious about the youth goals and never having had a closer look so far. Okay, thank you very much for participating. So now I have an idea who I can't see, but who is out there, hopefully. And I think it's the moment then to actually enter into the topic of the EU strategy and give you a bit of background knowledge. Okay. So actually what we call the EU Youth Strategy is actually the framework for youth policy cooperation in the EU for the years 2019 to 2027. And it's based on the Council resolution that has been published in November 2018. So it's quite an official document, and I thought as not all people are having a closer look at it on a regular basis, it might actually be nice for me to show it to you. Okay, let's just find the correct. Here you go. So yeah, as you can see, the EU strategy is actually an officially published document in the official journal of the European Union. And you can actually have publicly access to it. So it's something you could consult also in your national language. You can see on top here, you can have it in all the EU languages. So you can read it in English, but also in your language if you prefer actually. And just to show you a quick look about how the document looks. So basically you will have this official setting at the beginning, naming all the parts that have been actually part of the process. Followed by the main text. So that's what I'm going to talk mostly about today, and what is actually the content of the EU strategy. And in the end, you will also find different annexes, and one of them being actually the youth goals we will talk about later as well. And so maybe just to set a bit the frame of what is a strategy and what isn't it. So basically what's important to know, it's a legal framework based on cooperation. So it's not an official law. It's not something that the member states are obliged to, but it's more based on a cooperation between member states, especially when it comes to the youth ministers. And they decided that it's a process they would actually like to start together and to support together on EU level. Which also means there's an obligation behind it. But yeah, when you have a look at the document, you can see it's going quite far for something being based on voluntary basis, actually. And also something very important to know, the main text and the annexes have the same relevance. So sometimes you might hear in some discussions here, but the youth goals are only in the annex, so they're not that important actually, but that's not true. There's no difference actually between the main text and the annexes you can find there, which is quite important because a lot of important information is also located in the annexes you can find and close to the text itself. So maybe just so far as an introduction and for having a first look actually at how the strategy looks like. So I would now like to go a bit into the detailed text to give you a short presentation of what's actually written in there, what's the content of the strategy. So when you have a look on where does it actually come from, because this is also quite interesting when it comes to policy documents, of course. It's basically rooted back in 2015. You might remember that after the Paris attacks there in 2015, there has been a first joint declaration of the education ministers basically stating on the role of education when it comes to providing support to civic engagement, also to certain EU values, and also when it comes to this whole idea of preventing actually events like this, and then seeing how do you need to get youth involved actually in order to not having them joining paths like that. So what you can see in this declaration, and what also refers to the EU strategy, is actually that it's that it has a great focus on the European community. It's a lot about promotion of European values and also about civic engagement. And maybe for those who have known the old EU strategy, you can also really see a switch from a more individual focus and being a lot about employment, about personal development, and really focusing more now on this whole society approach actually. So this is something really new, and it's based back in the current events actually, and also what has happened since 2015. So it's also a lot on the involvement of civil society in the implementation process of the strategy. So I think this is also what this webinar is partially about today. How can you contribute? How can you contribute with your work? How can young people contribute actually and use this strategy for their everyday life? And so one thing we will also hear about is going to be the EU Youth Dialogue, because it's one of the main tools that are actually accessible for implementing the EU strategy. And another interesting thing is actually that there has also been an effort to better anchor the EU youth programs into the strategy, and also to see these two EU programs as one main implementation tool. So before, actually, when it comes to timing, the old EU strategy went from 2010 to 2018, which means we had a cut in the programs in 2014. So it was kind of hard to really have them working together. Now you can see that the new program generation will start from 2021 on, so next year, but both the new program generation and the EU strategy are set until 2027, which also means that a lot of you might actually already contribute to the implementation of the strategy, maybe even without being aware it, because as soon as you use certain program parts, you might actually already work within the frame of the EU youth strategy. Yeah, and then maybe just a short statement on what is actually written when it comes to young people in the EU youth strategy. So actually the intent is to have a joint EU response to the challenges that young people are actually facing in today's Europe. And what it's kind of stating as an entry point is that actually today you have overall quite improved living conditions when it comes to young people in many areas. But at the same time, you can also observe that there are still a lot of people being at risk of poverty, for example, at risk of social inclusion, maybe not in employment, not in training. So you kind of have also a growing gap, let's say, between those having a lot of opportunities and those who are not able yet to actually access those opportunities. So the aim is kind of to actually have a look at those social living conditions that are offered to young people in today's Europe, but at the same time, of course, also seeing that there are still a lot of inequalities and difficult life situations for some of those young people. So it's a lot about this idea of equal opportunities actually for all young people. This is also like something that differs from the old strategy because it's a bigger focus again here on society. And what is also quite interesting is that young people are really seen as active citizens. You will find quite several times the sentence being architects of their own lives, which also means it's less about young people being people where you need to give something to, but who you need to give something to, but more about young people being actually the ones who should be enabled to take care of their own lives and to use the opportunities that they can access. So that's kind of the basic idea behind the whole strategy as such. And there's also a clear statement about the fact that actually the EU can't afford to lose their young generation or to have young people not being able to make use of those opportunities that are offered. Yeah. So that's basically the entry point of the strategy. So having a look at today's society, having a look at actually how is the situation of young people in today's Europe. Then there's also the interesting question, of course, who are the actors of the strategy? And as you can see on the list, it's really a long list, I would say, not that long, but still a varied list. Because of course, when it comes to implementing the strategy, you will need actors on different levels. So you will of course have the member states being the ones setting the political frame, but it also goes down really to youth organizations, to youth workers, youth researchers. So basically, I think every single person listening to us right now out there should also be able to find him or herself in this list and to be part actually of this bigger process. And when we come from the scene that has been represented so far as an entry point, then of course it's also a question of what are actually the objectives of the EU strategy. So here when it comes to young people, we can state that it's about providing life skills, about promoting independence, resilience, and personal growth. So again, we have this whole idea of enabling young people to draw their own life. It's a lot also about promoting European identity, identification with European values, but also solidarity and civic engagement. So this is really something coming from the recent development also on political levels within the EU. It's a lot also about improving policy decisions in all areas when it comes to the impact on young people. So also this more cross-sectoral approach. There's also a need, of course, for different actors to cooperate if it's about improving the conditions for young people in general. And again, this very important point of course, promoting social inclusion, also having a look at poverty and discrimination in order to eradicate those factors. And in order to have all this a bit structured, actually, the whole strategy is built around those 3 keywords. So I think you might recognize them from the video we saw as an entry point as well for this presentation here. So basically it's around engage, connect, and empower. Those are the 3 core areas that have been defined within the strategy. And this might also be something interesting for you and your work, because depending on the area you choose, there are actually also different ways, of course, of connecting to there. And you will also see that the programs themselves are connected to different areas of the strategy, to those 3 keywords. So let's maybe have a close look together at the key area one by one. So I'm not going to go into all the details, because actually I could spend, I think, already 1 hour just trying to explain you what is all in there. So I'm going to try to keep it a bit short. So basically the first key area, engage, is a lot about young people and youth organizations being actually part of processes. So it's a lot about participation. You can see here some bullet points saying it's about inclusive democratic participation of all young people, but it's also a question of involvement of young people and youth organizations when it comes to implementation and also to evaluation of policies that affect them. It's also about establishing and developing youth representation structures at all levels, from local to European. You will have the EU Youth Dialogue named here again, so I will come to this special process later on, because I think this is a quite interesting and important one. And it's also about actually supporting young people in acquiring those participation skills, and also find innovative alternatives actually for participation. So I think now this whole COVID situation pushed us all to work in a more digital way, and this is also maybe a huge chance actually, because it's one of the ways, of course, to maybe also broaden spaces for participation of young people. Then we will have the second part about connecting. So I think this is actually one part of the strategy where you might find yourself in, because here it's mostly about cross-border mobility for all young people. So I think everyone who is implementing Key Action 1 projects, for example, youth exchanges, youth work mobilities, of course, this is where you connect actually to the strategy. It's also the part of the program where those mobility programs actually play a big role when it comes to implementing the strategy. But it's also a lot about volunteering. So here you can find a connection to the European Solidarity Corps, or the former EVS as we knew it. So it's really about bringing young people together, having spaces to learn from each other, making encounters, exchanging actually about certain issues, topic, your life. So this is what this whole area is actually about. And of course, when it comes to this mobility, it's also an important question of how can you actually assess and recognize the skills that are acquired in those contexts, so especially in those non-formal and informal learning settings. So this is also one important dimension, of course, when it comes to this key area. And then there's the last core area being named empowerment. So actually here, it's a more structural approach, I would say. It's a lot about the question of recognition of the field of youth work as such, actually, but also about the visibility of the work we are doing. So one important thing named here is the European Youth Work Agenda. Some of you might already have heard of it. If not, I'm sure you will hear of it within the next coming weeks and months. I think it will be too long actually to go into details here, but basically it's the whole idea of having a more structural approach on quality youth work for all youth work happening around Europe. And again, it's about supporting the quality of youth work from local to European level, and also the question of recognition. And yeah, also the question of how can you actually make all those things we're doing accessible. So also this question of youth contact and advice centers. How can you support actually the fact that also maybe people in more remote areas still can have access to this knowledge, to the programs, to those opportunities that are there actually. So this is, for example, the part of the program where you will mostly maybe find Key Action 2 projects. I mean, that's where you can connect because it's a lot about development of youth work. But yeah, also maybe, for example, TCA activities that are organized by the network of national agencies and where some of you definitely took part of, I guess, and where you can also have a look at how to develop quality for yourself, but also for your organization. Okay, so that was actually the first bigger part, a lot of input on the background of the strategy and a short presentation of the content. So I thought before going on with the implementation tools, it might be nice to have a quick check again if you are still on board, if you're following, how you feel now after this first input. Are you puzzled or did you get some new insights? So I would like to ask actually for the next poll question. Okay, let's see. So it seems that quite a lot of you still got the bigger picture now, maybe some new insights about the background of the document, but also some are still curious to see how does it actually connect to your work and how can you make use of it. And that's what the next section is actually going to be about. I forgot to say in the beginning, if you have questions, I think it already happens there, but just write them down and there will be a space in the end actually to answer all the questions you might have, and maybe some of them will also be answered during the rest of the presentation. So when it comes to implementation tools of the EU strategy, as you can see on the following slide, I will just quickly go through. There are actually a lot of different implementation tools, a lot of different ways. And I thought it might not be that interesting if I go through them one by one, just telling you what it is about. So instead, I actually decided to try to see which might actually be interesting for you, maybe relevant for your work actually. And also connect to the two questions there were in the poll. So which ones could you use for yourself, maybe for accessing knowledge, but how could you actually also contribute? And for doing that, I decided to quit the presentation more or less and to show you actually the tools that are there. I just need to find, yeah, exactly, the right ones. So one interesting tool that has been implemented thanks to the EU strategy that's connected to that actually is the so-called Youth Wiki. I'm not sure if some of you have already heard about it, but basically it's a platform that has been developed to present youth policies of the different EU member states. So as you can hear, it's also freely accessible, and you can actually decide to look for some background information. You can browse it either by country. For example, I don't know, if you would like to know more about youth policies in Portugal, you can get an overview and then also an overview of different topics that have been defined actually when it comes to youth policy. Or you could also, for example, decide to go by policy field. So example, if I know you work on social inclusion, you would actually like to get insights on how social inclusion is rooted in different other European countries, then you can also access via topics and have a look at different countries here. So let's say it's a platform where you can find a lot of knowledge, and of course, especially also when it comes to designing projects together or to have a look, maybe there's something interesting somewhere else I could use for my national or local context, it's a platform that can actually be quite useful, I would say. And where you can find a lot of information also on a European level when it comes to youth policy, and maybe get inspired. And of course, also check the background of your own local or national context that might also change from time to time. So that's actually one platform that is connected to the EU strategy. And then you will, of course, have the European Youth Portal. So I think this is one tool that might actually be familiar to a lot of you. So also this is a portal where, well, first young people themselves can actually find information like how can I join volunteering activities, how can I participate in some other EU processes. So it's basically information for young people, but also for you, it might be an entry point when it comes to certain formats or activity types you would like to use. I will actually come back to this platform later when we're going to talk about the EU Youth Dialogue. And then the last interesting thing that a lot of people are not too much aware about, and this is really connected as one of the annexes of the EU strategy, is actually the so-called FNAP. So it stands for Future National Measures of the Member States. And basically it's a survey that has been done connected to the EU strategy, and it's about how are actually the single member states going to connect to the strategy and to foster the implementation of the strategy in the national context. So this might actually also be interesting because it's kind of more national based. So it means it could also be something where you could have a look how is actually your country planning to implement the EU strategy. Maybe they have chosen certain youth goals that they would see as especially being a priority for your context. So it's also maybe one tool you could actually use to get a picture of how this is translated to a national level and when it comes to your country, because this is of course also the context all of you are working in. And you can also find this actually in the document itself, or you have also several links from the document actually leading you to this kind of questionnaire. You can choose different views also. This is not really readable at the moment, but I think you can also export it to Excel and then just look for your country, for example. Okay, so this was just a quick overview maybe on how to use the knowledge that is out there and something that can provide you background information when it comes to your work. And I guess the more important question will of course also be how can you actually contribute, how can you be part of this implementation of the strategy. So as I said already quite some times, I guess, one possibility is of course to make use of the EU youth programs, and I think a lot of you are actually already doing that. So all those who are working in Key Action 1, Key Action 2, Key Action 3, using volunteering, of course, this is already a way to contribute to the strategy itself. And maybe once that you know the document a bit better, you will also find for yourselves actually or make visible how you connect to that, and maybe also be more aware for yourself that you're actually already part of the implementation process. And one very specific tool I would like to present now in the last part of the presentation is actually the so-called EU Youth Dialogue. Because basically this is the one tool that is set in the implementation process to be the one being used by young people themselves. So it's the one actually where young people can have their voice heard and be part of this implementation process directly. So just to give you a quick overview how it connects to the strategy. So basically it's connected to this engage area to one of those 3 keywords. And it's the further development of the structured dialogue some of you might have heard of that has been implemented since 2010. So the basic idea of the EU Youth Dialogue is actually to bring together young people, but also youth organizations with political decision makers, but also other important stakeholders, for example, experts or researchers when it comes to certain topics of this society. And the idea is really to have them having dialogue and on an eye-to-eye level. So basically really having them coming together and having political decisions maker listening to young people, but also for young people having a platform to actually have direct contact to policy. So the idea is really to have a long-term platform for exchanging ideas. And one possible way of participating is actually through the Erasmus Plus program with the so-called EU Youth Dialogue projects. So it's the projects that are funded under the decentralized part of Key Action 3. It's a small key action, I have to admit. But here actually you have the opportunity to get funds for projects that will bring together young people with political decision makers. And it's also the one part of the program, which is quite interesting, that can be funded for national events. So I think it's the only part in the current Erasmus Plus program. So basically you can have local events where you bring young people with political decision makers. And yeah, you can get actually funds for that. So we have round 3 left if you would still like to apply for this kind of project format, and otherwise we will see how it will go on with this in the future program from 2021 on. And then again, when it comes to further participation opportunities, it's a lot about the national context. So I was struggling a bit on how to actually go for this part, because I could, of course, show you how we do it in Germany, who is responsible in Germany, how we have the information in Germany. But this is, of course, not interesting for all of you, because basically when it comes to the implementation of the EU Youth Dialogue, it's a lot about cooperating with the national responsible contact point. And so I guess at least it might be interesting for you to see where you can find this information, who might be actually the relevant actor for yourself. And here we will come again back to the European Youth Portal. So basically in the beginning, oh no, that was wrong, I'm sorry. Let's go back. Yeah, so if you click on Have Your Say, you will find actually the whole information about the EU Youth Dialogue. And this is also the part where you will be able to find the national contact points being responsible for the implementation process in every EU member state. And then here you can actually check where your country is, and then you will find the webpage of your national contact point, and this is where you should actually find further information. So basically those are the ones who will be responsible for organizing consultation processes with young people, but also with youth organizations when it comes to certain topics that have been chosen by this dialogue process. There might also be organization of certain trainings for having young people being representatives of their country and going to the youth conferences. And just to give you a quick look how it could look like, you will not be able to read it, or maybe not all of you, but basically this is, for example, the webpage of the German responsible contact point. And here you will, for example, also find interesting information about how this whole process is organized and what offers are there, how young people can actually be part of this process. Yeah, so I can just invite you to have a look and at what is happening in your national context and try to get more information there. And maybe this could also be like one part for you to actually, yeah, get on board and be part of this bigger process. Okay, and maybe just a short overview of the background again. How does this EU Youth Dialogue actually work? Because it's kind of a, well, it sounds like a complicated process if you are not used to it, I would say. So basically it's organized in a cycle of 18 months. So this connected to the 3 presidency we have on the European Union level. And the idea is that actually those 3 presidencies will choose one key topic that is connected to the EU strategy and mostly also connected to one of the European youth goals. And then they will have those 3 phases where you will have consultation processes with young people. So basically 3 successive phases, one connected to each presidency where you can have a focus on a certain topic or a certain youth goal. And yeah, you will also have one youth conference connected to each presidency. So this will be the platform where young people themselves will actually really be representing themselves and discussing this topic with political decision makers. So it's a lot about active participation of young people themselves, and the whole process is actually accompanied by a European steering committee and also by national working groups. So mostly in those national working groups, you will have representations of different youth structures you might have in your country. So this is also an interesting process because it's a lot about working together. And of course, there's research coming with it and also a continuous follow-up. Okay, and maybe just a quick word on what is the topic right now. So maybe as some of you might know, we just started actually a new cycle on the 1st of July with the presidency of Germany and Portugal and Slovenia. And so they decided to work actually on the youth goal number 9, space and participation for all. And there should be actually more information coming up on that, I think, in every context soon. And when it comes to the aims, I think I already said quite a lot of what is standing here. So actually, the general objective is to have a contribution to the strategy, to promote young people's active participation, and to have also the opportunity of equal participation for all. It's also a lot about inclusion. So also there you have a lot of spaces where it actually comes to also try to access those who are maybe living in more remote areas, or those young people who would not automatically actually by themselves jump on these opportunities. And in the end, it's about strengthening the citizenship of young people and their sense of belonging to the society. And maybe to show you at last one very concrete outcome actually, because you heard about the European Youth Goals. So what is quite interesting is actually that the youth goals themselves are a result of such a consultation process. So basically it's the result of the last 3 presidency that happened under the old EU youth strategy, so until 2019. And so the youth goals are actually the result of a process that happened with around 50,000 young people discussing on their vision for a future Europe. So what would be the most important key topics they would like to work on in order to shape a European Union they would see as the best one to live in for future generations. And so this is actually the outcome. And it's included now in the EU strategy. So actually, this is also the part in the strategy itself where you have the voice of young people represented, because basically it's the outcome of those discussions that happened in the last cycle. And just to show you very quickly what the European Youth Goals are. So what are those 11 goals we are talking about all the time? So you can see the list here. Basically, I think it's covering every important area you can have in your life. So coming from connecting EU with youth, but also about equality of genders, inclusive societies. You will have the whole area of mental health and well-being in general. Employment, of course, still a very important topic for young people. Quality learning, but also space and participation for all. Green Europe, like a topic that is very important for the young generation right now. And of course, also the role of youth organizations and European programs and how to make them actually also accessible to all young people. And yeah, so actually, when it comes to maybe also your work or to project applications, for example, it's also very interesting to have a look. Do you actually connect to one of those European youth goals? Because very often with everything we do, I guess there's mostly a connection point. So this can also be quite interesting. Also, when it comes to the cycle happening right now, I think it's a very open topic when it comes to space and participation for all young people. So this is actually maybe also something to keep in mind and to connect to when it comes to actually implementation of your own work. Okay, so I guess that was a very quick presentation, hopefully through the most important points of the strategy, how you can make use of it. Of course, I know, I think I only, where I was only able to give you some very short insights, but I hope you will maybe have the opportunity to go deeper in what would be interesting for you, in having a closer look at the information that might be relevant for your context. And I would like to close before we go to the question answer part actually with one last poll to again see a bit how you feel after the presentation. Do you feel totally overwhelmed? Did you find it useful? Is there something you could connect to? So yeah, I would ask to open the last question from my side. Okay, so it seems like most of you are still processing all the information, which I can totally understand, but I'm happy to see that there are also some who got inspired. Yeah, some are already browsing the websites to get more details on what's important. So I really hope I could at least get you an insight where to find information if you need it. And I can also see that there are some having a lot of follow-up questions. And I think this is what we can actually do now to at least take some of the questions and try to get certain clarifications on some areas that might maybe not be all clear yet. So yeah, thank you for listening. And I think I'll hand over the floor back to Jochen or whoever is going to take over.
Thank you so much, Alicia. Actually, it came in quite handy that you speak so fast because it was so much information. It was actually really, really rich presentation, and we are getting also a lot of positive feedback here in the chat. Yes, the Q&A session is on. Maybe it's useful for you, Alicia, to actually also look at the questions. So I can read them, but if you see them at the same time, it's maybe useful also. So there's a first question about the COVID-19. Since this was written, there must be a far great risk as a result of the pandemic and migration. Is there an addendum? Is the first question here.
Mm-hmm. An addendum to the strategy or?
I guess to the document.
To the document itself. Not as I know so far. Well, I think this whole pandemic situation is actually right now challenging a lot of areas when it comes to, especially to mobility in Europe. So I think we will see how this will go on. I mean, basically, I think I'm not sure if the question is about if there's going to be more migration or if I get really clearly what is meant. But so far, I think the strategy is already covering a lot of different issues. So I'm not sure it would need an addendum for the strategy itself. But of course, for example, when it comes to this whole dimension of working more digitally right now, the risk it might bring, but also the opportunities, this is something that will definitely, I think, be considered when it comes to implementing the strategy actually for the coming months and years also, of course. So I hope this kind of answers the questions. Yeah, there's no option here right now to see if someone is nodding or not. Yeah, if not, but just maybe ask again.
No, but I think it's obviously there needs to be this. It's also what I said in the beginning. There's gonna be new challenges due to this crisis, and exactly. A lot of things will be answered through this strategy, but there will be also new ones. There is a second question here on, is there anything that talks about accessibility and inclusion? You might have answered that already, and the person refers to the Voices of Culture 2018 document. I don't know if you see this question.
Yeah, I can see it. So I'll just quickly read through it. So if I get it right, it's a lot about what is meant with inclusion and what is the expectation actually behind this term social inclusion. So from what I can get from the question, there's kind of the criticism that it's maybe just a one-way street, like basically we expect people to be included in our culture, in our society, but we don't expect so far to respect also what they bring. So maybe just to answer to that, I think some of you might also have heard of the inclusion strategy actually. So I think this is also very deeply connected to program implementation, but also to the EU strategy. And what I can say is that actually when we talk about social inclusion, it's of course meant in a two-way street. I think this is also the whole work that is done right now actually, and when it comes to social inclusion, to work on the inclusion term itself, and also the way it's used in the programs, to really have this two-way dimension, of course, and not only to see the effort by those who are arriving here, but more in the society in general. So it's really like everyone has to somehow be part of this process, and it's not only about one part changing and adapting, but actually to all. And I think the strategy is kind of trying to make this visible also when it comes to the whole importance of civil society to values. So of course, this is always a two-way street, I would say. You cannot expect others to have certain values if you don't carry them yourself.
Sure. Maybe also questions from some other people here, and please, for the audience, you can use this Q&A section to answer questions. Here is a question on the FNAP and how to contact them, if I understand it right. Well, there's a website, and I guess we can also, obviously, your presentation, we can share it with the audience. Is that right? Can we send it to people?
Yeah, we can share it. I checked that actually. We don't do that too often at the moment normally, because sometimes we ended up having old presentations still being presented as the new ones. But in this case, I checked, and we can actually send it to the participants.
Or at least some sources which are relevant to.
And name some sources here. So I think you will have all the links in the presentation. Also the link to go to the website of the FNAP, for example, and then you can take your time to check it out there.
Great. Here's another one. You see the last one here. Has the youth strategy predict the participation of young people from WB6? If yes, how?
I guess I would need some more information. What is meant by WB6?
Maybe the person can answer or write it in the question.
Yeah, that would be nice, because I think I'm missing the context here to actually be able to answer the question. Yes. Western Balkan countries.
Yes, that must be it. The 6, yeah.
Okay, so now I get it. Well, I mean, I would say when it comes to the Western Balkan countries, for example, especially when it comes, for example, to bigger parts of the programs, of course, they can be part of the process already. I think there are also like a lot of other formats where it's especially about the cooperation between Western Balkan states and also the EU states. I'm not sure in how detailed it's actually explicitly written in the strategy, but I would say, of course, it's not excluded. I mean, we have a lot of projects being funded where you have cooperation with the neighboring countries, and I know for sure that it's something very important, especially in the youth field, also to have a look at how does it work when it comes to our neighbors, how can we also cooperate there, and how is there also a need for exchanging in order to have quality on both sides, of course. So yeah, I think it's there, maybe not explicitly named, but for sure implicitly it's meant to be, and it's seen actually in the implementation of the different program structures.
Great. There's another question here. Oh, there's several. I have experience volunteering in international youth associations, but not in working European programs. How can I work for this strategy to get implemented?
So this is a big question. Well, I mean, I try to show how the strategy connects actually also to every personal context you are working in. So I would say, I mean, basically just by doing your work, I mean, I don't know the special context from each of you, but just by doing actually your work, the projects you are doing, the activities you might do with young people, it's already a contribution to the implementation. And of course, what you can do is to just double check also, how are you connecting to the youth goals? How are you connecting to the core areas? And if it comes to the direct involvement of young people, then I would say I would definitely have a look at the EU Youth Dialogue and maybe try to see for your country if there's a national contact point. Of course, this is only the case so far within the EU countries. And then maybe get some more information there on how you could actually be part of the process.
Mm-hmm. Great. Another one on COVID-19, of course, it's a big question. I think many people are wondering. So if there are specific changes, for example, for distance learning possibilities. I mean, we have this challenge ourselves for a big youth exchange in autumn, and the question is, can we do an online conference of 1 week, which is challenging, but maybe also interesting and possible. What is from your side or from the EU side? Is there new changes planned?
Well, I think we're still in a situation where it's about seeing what is happening and reacting right now. I can only speak for at least the situation, how it is like in the current projects that are still running right now at the moment that have been granted in the past. So basically, there have been some flexibilities within the rules to enable at least partially online versions or mixed versions actually. And I think then in the long-term view, we will see in how far this whole digital new space we have acquired now will actually be also part of future planning and also maybe a more regular part of the work we are doing. Yeah, but when it comes to the very specific changes, I think it would take too long now to go into details. But yeah, when it comes to projects that are running at the moment, I can just advise to actually check with your contact person or with your NA in how far there are options if it's a situation you're really facing right now at the moment. When it comes to perspectives, I think we will see what is going to happen, but I think we can all experience right now that actually we know we're not going to go back to before the COVID-19 situation. I think we all have this feeling that digital work will somehow be a bigger part in the work we are doing. Let's see how and in which amount, and also how it will connect in a sensible way. I think now we're still in this kind of I don't know, period of gathering experiences, and then at some point there will for sure be this time to also reflect on it and to see what is useful, what are challenges, what is maybe not that useful actually.
Perfect. We're actually running out of time, but we can maybe take one more question here. Will the EU Youth Goals get a bigger role in the Erasmus Plus 21-27 program? Is this something we can expect?
We will see. There's nothing more I can say so far. It's still under development. So yeah, if you're curious, just check out what's going to be communicated at certain points about the new program. But for sure, the new program will be connected to the EU strategy. And so in this sense, there will also be a connection to the youth goal, but I can't tell yet in how detailed and if they will be named and where they will be named and so on.
Great. All right, so this is it for today. It was extremely informative, as I said, and thank you so much, Alicia, for this great webinar. We had a lot of people. You've probably seen it in your participation box, but thank you again. It is just also for us, we can say that as YEP Europe, we feel extremely supported by the national agency in Germany, and we are very, very grateful and happy for all you are doing, and specifically today for your contribution to this webinar. And so thank you very much for all the audience, people in the audience. We will follow up. Here's a last poll where you can tell us how you found it. And yes, we will follow up with you with the recording of this webinar, with unanswered questions eventually, and some sources, as Alicia said, some key sources to do further research. And yes, thank you for being with us, all of you, Alicia, my team, and the audience. So thank you very much. We're just gonna blend in the poll results in a second and say goodbye and wish you a great summer.
And thank you for having me here. It was a pleasure, and I hope everyone will be able to take something out of it actually, and yeah, at least some inspiration.
Great, thank you so much. I think we can just show the poll. And great. Very good ratings. So thank you, Alicia.
I'm happy then.
Have an excellent day, and as I said, a great summer, and goodbye.
Yeah, same for you. Bye, everyone.
Okay, ciao.